Welcome, Nathaniel. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are at, I'm going to just pick a number because I can't remember the exact number, but this is somewhere in the 50 range of interviews, and we're very excited to have you here today at Ask an Angel, which is part of our Supporter Fund series, and really excited that we get to chat. We've chatted a few times before, but there's a few things that I really enjoyed about our conversation and kind of what you guys are doing. But before we jump into all of those, maybe we can get you to give us just a bit of a background on yourself. So kind of where you've come from, I guess where you're at now and the things that you're looking to do. And then one thing about you that nobody will know.
Sure. So thanks for having me and for the questions. And so, something as far as my background, I'm actually an engineer by training and an entrepreneur really throughout my life. My first company I started in college, although my first time making money was in middle school, but we were not incorporated, so I can't count that. I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. I've also worked for larger companies, and so kind of earned my stripes in engineering with a larger, actually a Alberta-based company named Encana. But then continued my path, took over the family business and grew it to record levels. And we actually sold that business. So the past 6 years, I've been, business owner, an angel investor, an advisor, an appointee in economic development. And then most recently started Cortado Ventures this year. And then something about me, that was the other thing, right? Something about me nobody will know. That's a good one. So I think probably I have 5 older brothers. So a lot of people are maybe surprised to hear that. I have 5 older brothers, and we all did different things, right? So some of us we have we have an engineer, we have a banker, we have somebody in Hollywood, that's doing computer graphics for blockbusters, and so I think maybe through that I kind of saw all the different things that people do. For a living, and maybe that I feel like it may have opened my eyes a little bit to all the different things I can be involved in.
Any sisters, or just the family of 5 boys?
Just the 5 boys. So 6 boys total with me, and so my poor mother. And it's kind of we had different backgrounds. Kind of it was a combined family, and so I think that was a lot of fun growing up. I never really knew that they were. I just kind of assumed that everybody had a bunch of brothers growing up, and kind of figured out later that was pretty special for us.
Oh, that's amazing. I have 3 other brothers, so I'm a family of 4 boys as well. So you're obviously got the 5, but it is a different dynamic. In the little town I grew up in, there was 2 other families that also had families of 4 boys. So we actually all hung out together just because there were so many similarities. And as odd as that doesn't sound, like you would just hang out with anybody, why you're attracted to some family that had 4 boys as well. Did you guys face that as well? You're like, we're so different, we better find a family of 4 guys or 5 guys to hang out with.
Yeah, we could only go to places that had didn't have any fine china, and that didn't have anything breakable, right? So the neighborhood kids, definitely we spent most of our time outside. So we got along with people that were good with just being outside and kind of roaming around the neighborhood.
That's awesome. Well, I want to touch base on this one job that you had that you were making money that you didn't qualify as being a government-based company, I guess, or maybe give us a little idea of that, because those are always exciting stories and they really do help depict kind of the person that's in front of us and what the great things they've been up to.
Well, it might be, it's probably not what you're expecting, but maybe that makes it more interesting. I don't know. But so I was in middle school, and this would have been in the early 90s. And so, before, and I was young. And so this before like cell phones and before email was ubiquitous. And my parents dropped me off at a hockey camp. And so even though I'm from Oklahoma, I still, I actually grew up playing hockey. And so I got dropped off at a hockey camp in Minnesota. And then my parents were going to go on a trip. And so I wasn't going to be able to get a hold of them, right? I couldn't just call the house phone and get a hold of them. Well, they dropped me off, and then later realized that neither one of them remembered to leave me any money. And so I had to find a way to kind of fill in the gaps between the provided meals and find a way to pay for my meals. And so I ended up coming up with a scheme where I would like pre-sell pizza by the slice. And so I like take orders throughout the dorm, kind of highest bidder, like by the slice, and then collect the money in advance, and then order the pizza, and then pay for it, and then like take my cut, and then distribute the slices to the people that prepaid. So yeah, after that, the camp made a rule that campers couldn't do business with each other anymore, and so to me is that a necessity, but that was my first time making money, I suppose. But
Oh, that's brilliant. You solved the problem, right? You were like, I got no money. I got to do something, or I can just eat the regular 2 meals a day, or I can go out and figure out how I can get around this. So
exactly.
brilliant. Hey, it worked. And
Necessity.
I love those little stories because I think that they really define the individual on are they able to work around problems? Are they able to drive and fix a problem that's in front of them when they get further on in life? And you're able to do that. And, I've in lots of interviews I've done, but also just in context of entrepreneurs, they'll tell you about a story where they were selling things to students or to people in grade school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I built airplanes. One guy built airplanes and sold them to the kids, so he didn't have to do it. So it's funny, right? It's a good little way that you move through and make your money and grow, right?
Well, and also looking back on it, it never occurred to me then to like try to figure out how to get a hold of my parents or like try to get money from some other adult. I mean, like my mind immediately went to, I need to, get money. I need to find ways to get money from my fellow campers to then, support what I want to get next, so maybe that's somehow instructive on my mindset.
Oh, 100% it is, 100%. So now you're in Oklahoma. You operate, you work, you run everything out of that state. What have you found, and how has it worked in the ecosystem for startups? Because now that you've kind of built and groomed through your companies and things that you've done in the past, now you're faced with this whole new ecosystem of being in startup world. Is the community built around startups, or is this so completely new and you're kind of being a driver in this space?
Yeah, I actually the answer would have been way different 10 and even 5 years ago. So, over the past 10 years and especially over the last 5 years, there have been developments of now we have, accelerators and incubators, co-working spaces, university programs, angel clubs. And so there was some of that, credit where credit's due. There was some of that before, but the acceleration and development of that there's been more in the last 5 years than there was in the previous 50 years, let's say. And so our perception was this is a great time to start an early stage venture capital fund. And so the pipeline's been built, and so here we are in a position to make those early stage investments. And Oklahoma, and then let's say this part of the country, has been getting more and more attention even before COVID, but especially because of COVID. I mean, almost every week I see an article in the Wall Street Journal or elsewhere talking about how some VC fund or famous investor or entrepreneur is moving to the middle of the country or moving to other markets outside of kind of your usual suspects, because you can build a company much more affordably, which is good for investors and entrepreneurs because they keep more equity. And so that's playing out and being accelerated with COVID as well. And we're seeing that. I mean, almost every week I talk to an entrepreneur who has moved to Oklahoma from some major market because they saw that opportunity. And, with remote working becoming the norm, it just made a lot of sense for them to do that.
Well, it's interesting because we've been chatting with different groups, cities, and in the area in Canada and Ontario, and they're coming up with plans to try and figure out how to keep their people engaged and living in their cities and towns, because there's, I wouldn't say a mass exodus, but there's been a few people, more than normal, if you will, a few percent more, that are now deciding, hey, I'm going to go move over here because I want more property and I don't want to be in the city. So with that exodus all kind of happening in the US, it's folding inwards, I guess, instead of moving elsewhere out to San Fran, to New York, where all the major hubs are for startup land or business running. They're spreading into the middle. Is that forcing you guys as a city or town to be figuring out how to expand your town and the way you're operating it? Or is it not that drastic at this point, so you're just kind of dropping in accelerators and incubators to kind of help facilitate this influx of new people?
Well, Oklahoma City, where I am, is especially, I think, well suited for this because we have no topographical features that kind of restrict where we are. In fact, Oklahoma City, by area, by just square miles, is one of the largest in North America. And so by population, not so much, but so, there has actually been a lot of that over the decades, spreading out and finding, the cheaper land and developing in the far areas. But there had been more of a move actually towards the middle and densifying. And so you do see it's been slowed down this year, but because of COVID, but it's still happening, which I think is a testament in and of itself, where you actually see more people seeking to be in the city center, and you see more density. And there's plenty of infill development opportunities, and that's been continuing. And so I think, and actually I was looking at just the other day, our population has doubled in, I mean, I think in the last 20 years or so, don't quote me on that, but it has been a significant increase in population, over just a short number of decades. And so it's almost like we're built to be growing. There's been a lot of investment in infrastructure here and quality of life, economic development, and it's paying dividends. And we thought we had kind of hit the peak, but now there's this whole new dynamic of a recognition by the investment community and by the business community, and frankly by even political leadership, to say we need to diversify our economy beyond oil and gas. And so we need to invest in things that will attract other types of industries, and we're poised to be an enabler and a beneficiary of that development.
And that's amazing. And it's good that the cities are thinking of this. And I do think a lot of this is coming from obviously the web and the way that the stories are getting picked up on unicorns and all of the change that's happening in the startup world. Everybody wants to be a startup. COVID kind of helped accelerate that again, just like in 2007-8 when the financial crisis happened. There was a big push into startup world and trying to expand that. And now there's a lot more funding and dollars that are coming into the startup world versus 10 years ago. So I think that that's really helping accelerate it. How much from a government standpoint, local government versus Congress, how much are they pushing down to help, pushing money and helping out early stage companies?
Yeah, I think most of what I see is at a statewide level. So you see states that are coming up with different incentives to promote early stage investing. And in fact, I think it'll be considered in this next legislature that starts in Oklahoma. I've seen other states do something similar recently. I think with the new administration, I did see recently that there is some idea to incentivize early stage investing with the new administration coming in. We'll see if that happens, but the fact that it's even being thrown about means that it's on top of somebody's mind that's in that administration. So, but yeah, we do see a deliberate effort in Oklahoma and in other states in this part of the country to incentivize at the state level. But you're also seeing like departments of commerce, and you're seeing economic development agencies in different towns that are trying to find their own ways to incentivize, if not through a tax incentive, through underwriting a development to convert something into a space into co-working location, or to bring in somebody who will study that local ecosystem to say what are the sectors where we should invest a lot of time and try to attract that type of entrepreneur. And so even if it's not necessarily economic, just looking at other ways to leverage the political leadership, I see it happening at some at kind of city and town, like government level. I see it happening a lot at the state level. And so I think that's maybe where you see most of the innovations, kind of the government or policy innovations happening, is at the state level.
And does that drive a lot more, like the companies or the entrepreneurs that would be coming into Oklahoma? Is that more deep tech versus product? Because now you've got distribution and operational issues that can come out of being just in the core, which means that you're pushing outwards. Does that become more uncost effective, I guess, or it becomes a breakdown? So you're driving in more entrepreneurs that are really looking at deep code, deep tech, where they can be anywhere and it doesn't matter because it's just all online based. Is that the types of companies that you're seeing kind of filter their way into the Oklahoma area?
Yeah, I do see some of that. I think us recognizing like where we should be spending our time is really important, right? Because just saying we want to have innovation happen, we want to have entrepreneurs, that's not going to be as productive as saying where do we have infrastructure, where do we have native talent and kind of institutional knowledge that and what sectors do we already have that are or that are emerging in the state that we can leverage. And so Tulsa recently came out with a study that identified drones and energy and a couple other areas as being great places to spend to focus on innovation. And so we have a strong Air Force presence in Oklahoma, and a lot of aerospace companies, and then certainly energy and oil and gas, but also beyond oil and gas, but thinking more about tech, right? Not thinking so much about hardware, but thinking about what kind of deep tech can we deploy, what kind of AI can we deploy to maximize productivity or cut costs, or to address environmental impacts, but with application in energy. And so in some cases, yeah, you may see kind of deep tech, but then applied to agriculture, applied to areas where you see a lot of success, or you see a lot of sectors that are already developed here. So, and then also there's kind of manufacturing and logistics, transportation. And so because where we are and kind of the major highways that are kind of we're a crossroads of some major highways, there's a lot of interest in transportation. So a lot of times that manifests as hard tech, and so hard tech with kind of a SaaS platform, we're seeing some of that, and which makes sense. So all those things make sense where you're saying, hey, I see this trend happening in New York or San Francisco, whatever I see, but what does that mean? What does that look like if we were to take some of that same skill set and apply it in Oklahoma?
100%. And I think that really defines the area eventually too, right? So then where you're getting that type of AI, the type of developers or the people that entrepreneurs that are going to come into that sector and kind of expand it. And it kind of goes on the premise too around cities and towns. Like once you start to define like what San Francisco is all about and what it builds up and New York is building up, all the towns have to be unique identifiers for themselves as well. Like what are we good at? What do we need help in? We've got cities outside of Toronto in the GTA where you've got really deep tech going on in Hamilton. They're doing a lot of, they've got structures set up for Bitcoin mining. They've got a lot of deep tech that's really fit into there because, like you said, infrastructure costs are cheaper. They've got the university there, which is a pretty big university. So once you start to segment that in, then all of those businesses all start going there because they can see that they're going to get resources, they're going to get PhDs, they're going to get AI, they're going to get support. So then that hub just keeps building and building because that's where that emphasis was. Whereas you go a little bit further, you get in Niagara Falls, and now all of a sudden you've got a bigger change in there because you've got wine country, so different tech that's building in over there, so different entrepreneurs. So I think you start to see across the cities and countries that where you're going to start emphasizing, and being in Oklahoma, I guess you've got to pick the companies that you feel are going to better fit in your portfolio based on what the expansion can occur from where they are to going outwards. Because I believe one of the things that you guys were looking at is trying to focus more on Oklahoma-based companies. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So we definitely, and companies that are here or that want to move here for a reason, right? So we look at that go-to-market strategy and the product market fit, and we kind of ask ourselves, why us? Why Oklahoma? And how can we help give that company an unfair advantage because of our knowledge? My partners and I have all built companies in Oklahoma in different sectors. So how can we leverage that to give that company unfair advantage? How does them being located here give them an unfair advantage? And those answers generally are going to tie into, there's the fact they're operating in one of those verticals. Again, whether it's software, hard tech, if the use case, or if one of the use cases, kind of the beachhead, so to speak, is in a vertical that's strong here, then it would make a lot of sense for them to be located in Oklahoma for access to customers and channel partners.
I love it. So while you guys are kind of building out your fund and figuring out the types of companies, I kind of want to pull back to where you started with all of this and how much of your past experiences are really helping you today. And I believe you spent some time in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
How much of that experience do you feel, just the way it's structured, the way it works, and then going in and building your own company and then selling it, how much of these experiences do you find really transfer into what you guys are doing today?
Yeah, I see so much, and we can all be lucky if we feel like we're being fully, utilized and fulfilled and kind of bringing our experiences to our work. And I'm in a fortunate position to have that, because I even have some background in politics. And I feel like a lot of, what we're doing is like a campaign, right? Like we have a story to tell. We have, stakeholders to align. And it's a bit of a sprint to say, like, we're going to raise the fund, and then we're going to find people that think like we do and bring people onto our team. And so whether that be, investors, stakeholders, or entrepreneurs that see that vision. And yeah, I think background as a business owner and operator and entrepreneur, I've been funded as a business owner. I've been funded with private equity, as well as family office and direct institutional. So the different kind of colors of money and the similarities and differences, and how they all kind of fit in together. I think that's been very helpful. But then also just kind of seeing it from the other side of the table, and knowing what entrepreneur is going through, and having it's the empathy, but also maybe being able to be helpful and say, like, I know that when I was in those shoes, I was really thankful when somebody gave me that feedback. And so I think that is informing a lot of what we do. As far as like the Air Force background, I certainly have a different sleeping pattern than I maybe did, and a less well-made bed than I did at those times. But certainly having being organized and having so situational leadership is something they talk about a lot, especially kind of in the officer ranks, where you like knowing when it's appropriate, how close to lean in on micromanaging versus pulling back, and there's a lot of time spent in that, but also just the communication, the organization, and the expectation to perform. Those are things that absolutely carry through, because we're all, especially when you have a distributed workforce, and where it's very kind of, what we're doing is very decentralized, right? We have investments with a number of companies, and certainly we'll have more. So there's a lot of expectation of people are going to execute on their jobs. How do we communicate what those expectations are, but then how do we enable them to do the best that they can? Those are all kind of features of what we do. We're not just one company that is very centralized, and so I think those things are informed by a lot of the experiences I've had.
So did you taking the Air Force structure, the discipline, all of these key elements that you go through, that repetitive nature? I'm assuming that there's a lot of that, even though you may not realize it at the time. But you take that, and do you find that when you're working with companies and you see this disorganized, not moving in the direction that their plans are saying, or not validating things, do you find that kind of comes out more, and you're almost trying to create a structure and say, hey, look, we need to scratch this and do this all over again. This is how you have to look at something, because I find that even when we work with a lot of entrepreneurs at the beginning, that is not further along, they find their groove. But at the beginning, it's just this big discombobulated process of just taking everything in and trying to do whatever they can to keep moving forward, and not realizing that all of those things may actually be causing congestion and not helping them move forward fast enough. So do you find that you guys get to do a lot more hands-on and dive in and help them kind of build their way up to that next investment? Or are you kind of sitting on the sidelines?
Well, I think, knowing like the right level of structure, and then where to focus, right? So being able to have, some of it's just experience, and others is, when you're in the middle of it and when you're trying to build something, it's very tempting to be like, I'm going to do everything because by golly, I'm going to just do whatever it takes to be successful. But then you can kind of be your own worst enemy, because if you just did the most important thing amazingly and then everything else was like a C minus, like that's probably better than doing everything at like B minus level, right? And so, but then like picking what that is and then having the discipline to stick to it and know why you're sticking to that, is an important feature from those experiences. But we also can sometimes see analysis paralysis or like too much structure. I think that happens less, but there is, I think there's definitely a value in, you got to do it, right? I mean, and so actually there's this saying in the Air Force that hope is not a plan, like just saying that, like, I hope, we're going to make this big structure and have this kind of beautiful like presentation and this like great set of advisors. And, it's like at some point you need to actually just like make the plan and execute and just like do the next step, build the thing, get that first customer. And so there's a bit of an art to that as well, and knowing where to strike that.
And do you guys spend, like, is there a good amount of time when you guys make an investment? And maybe you can describe a little bit about how that investment works. When you find a company you like, what is that next process? Is it deep dive, you're spending time like a consultant side of things, or are you just kind of making that investment and then coaching along as you go? Is there something further you're diving into to really help these companies expand and get to that growth stage?
Yeah, we try to really get to know the entrepreneur, which Zoom in some ways makes that easier or harder. I mean, you get to visit with more of a team, because it's easy to get on a Zoom call, but you don't have the face-to-face element. But we certainly do spend a lot of time trying to know the entrepreneur and their motivations, and really what's driving them, where are they strong, where are they weak, how self-aware they are. That's there's a lot to that, because lack of self-awareness means that you're not going to see your blind spots. Once we feel like that the big rocks, the big things are there as far as the team, the idea, and the market, then there is a period of getting to know that entrepreneur. And we'll spend some time through that before we actually move into the due diligence. And so and we do spend a good amount of time on the technical diligence in terms of looking at, I mean, if it's software, can it scale? How is the architecture sufficient to be able to scale and do what they want it to do? If it's more and we also spend time visiting with customers, potential customers that passed, and finding out, is it something that they love? We want to invest in companies that built something that their customers just have to have. And so having that candid conversation is a really important part of our process, because we can be in love with something and just think the world of the team. But if the customer response is not there, then that's going to be a stopping point for us. Now, I said that, if there is still high conviction around the team as we get to know them, we know that plan A is rarely going to be the thing that actually works. And so the ability of an entrepreneur to pivot to plan B and C and D is actually even more important than just having the kind of beautiful plan A. And so it's actually not necessarily a death knell to see that the product just isn't there. In some cases, we may want to be in position to say, have you looked at applying your technology in this way or this kind of customer demographic. And I think, that discovery process and seeing how that team and how that entrepreneur reacts to that feedback and is able to pivot is really important to us.
I love it. You mentioned past clients. What I like about this is that not only you're focusing on the clients that are using the system, you're finding out why customers didn't use the system.
Mm-hmm.
You guys might actually probably may be able to get them to convert back and use it eventually because you're doing that reach out. But when you are having that discussion, what are you finding, or what are the reasons that they're backing away? Is it a financial thing? Is it they just weren't qualified enough? Or was it they just went with the competitor? Like, what do you kind of build around stats around that?
Yeah. Sometimes we see that it's maybe just like not a tech stack fit, and so like, okay, well, once we have the integration built out, that'll solve for that. And so that's good. Other times it's something where the benefit of the product is just not that great, like, yeah, it works, but it's the adoption versus the benefit. And it's really, sometimes it's not just a straight up like cost benefit analysis. I mean, it's tempting to think that like, well, if the cost benefit analysis is a go, then it should sell. But a lot of times it's just the adoption hurdle, because you may have managers that say like, this is amazing, all of my associates should use this. But if the associates that are, or the technicians or the people that are supposed to use it don't like it, then guess what? It's just not going to work. Even if the numbers are there. And so, so trying to find out if there's a disconnect, and sometimes seeing that there's a disconnect between, the manager loves it, but for some reason just can't get the people on the ground to use it if that's applicable. So we see that, sometimes. And then I think, and sometimes we hear feedback about, or just not sure about the viability of the company, not sure if they're going to, love the idea, love the tech, everything there checks out, but then just worried about, is that company going to be able to scale up, and are they going to be around for 10 years, And so, and that's actually also some feedback that we maybe are okay hearing, because like, well, we can help solve that. If we can help them get funded, then we can actually help solve that issue. But if it's an adoption issue, or if it's kind of that do they love it? Is the benefit there? If that's the issue, which is kind of we hear those four things, maybe probably evenly spread, then that's hard to overcome.
And that's good that, like you said, when they're having, and I've seen this issue quite a few times, where the business doesn't want to put mission critical in the hands of a startup. So they're worried by, are these guys going to be here in 2 years, and am I going to have to revamp everything and redo all this process to get everybody, all my associates or my team, integrated into this platform? Mm-hmm. So it's good that you guys are doing this, because you're actually becoming a support mechanism for that, because then they see that the VC money is actually supporting the outcome of this company. So they might be more inclined to say, hey, you know what, maybe you guys are making me feel a bit more comfortable. We could do something here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. That's great. And you don't hear that very often. So I think that that's a unique piece that you guys are doing, that you're not just diving into existing customers, you're diving into the ones that didn't cross the line. And getting that feedback is hugely important to making the decision to invest, but also a decision if this company can scale, if they're really solving a major problem. So kudos. I think that's your engineering background.
Yeah, you got to, you can't just go off of survivor bias, right? You have to find out what happened to the ones that didn't make it.
No, I like it. That's great. So now, just to kind of shift things over, I wanted to jump into, we have some rapid fire questions. So we'll jump into those, and then there's a couple more questions that we have from there. But we'll jump into those if you're ready for them.
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right. How did you get started in investing into startups?
I invested in a good friend of mine about 6 years ago, the technology that he was developing. So I just believed in him, and that was my first investment.
Awesome. What's your favorite part of investing?
Learning new ideas. Sure, like just seeing all the new cool things that are out there, and that's my favorite part.
Okay. How many companies do you invest in per year?
We are on a pace. We're still very young, but we're on a pace to be about 10 per year.
Perfect. It's huge. Okay. Any verticals you like to focus on?
Yeah, I'd say energy, aerospace, ag, biotech, fintech, insurtech, and logistics.
Okay. It's a good mix. I like that. When you guys are doing your due diligence, is there any specific requirements that you guys need to have in order to make an investment?
Always like to see a pro forma. I know that's kind of a touchy point because pro formas can be totally made up. But I'll put it this way: if you can't make up a good-looking pro forma, well, that's a bad sign, right? If you can't logic your way into a good-looking pro forma, then how on earth is reality ever going to live up to that?
Well, and you need targets, so you got to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I like it. What's your timeline for investments? Because you've talked about doing some a lot of pre-work before you make an investment, which I think is brilliant. And a lot of times you don't get that option to spend time learning about a company, meeting a team. So what does that look like for you guys when you're making an investment?
Yeah, we've pulled off a pre-seed in a matter of weeks. If it's again, pre-seed, you're really just kind of yes no on a couple of issues. Series A is probably more like 3 months, the full bit. But I'd say on average, probably about 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay,
period.
it's a good time. On your DD materials, are there any things that you want to make sure that you see on paperwork or team CEO? Is there something that stands out that you really get behind when you're making that investment?
I think how that team or entrepreneur came upon that solution. What is the story? What were they working on? What problem did they solve and say, aha, I got to quit my day job and do this? That Genesis story is really important to us.
I like that. Yeah, what got them to put this on their plate 100%? Do you look to lead rounds?
We do. It's not a must criteria for us, but we do expect and will be soon leading or co-leading some rounds.
Okay. Do you have any preferred terms? Pref shares, common shares, safes?
We do safes and convertibles at the, pre-seed and seed level, and to be a typical feature is kind of your Y Combinator, like Cooley-Go type terms, but conversion, I think conversion caps are important for us. That's just kind of that. Frankly, it's just a way of getting credit, by protecting against dilution on that next round. But then we always look for on a price round, look for a board seat or board observer rights, and and pro rata rights are another kind of must have.
Okay. And do you do follow-on investments percentage?
Yeah, in fact, our default is probably a follow-on. You'll actually expect to invest in dozens of companies at the pre-seed stage, and then follow on as they hit certain milestones. So we'll set aside 40 to 50% of the fund for follow-on.
Awesome. It's a lot higher than most, so that's good. I do agree that you need that, especially when a pandemic comes around. You can need some cash to dip in there. Outside that, are there any other ways that you guys look to help startups outside of just the cash and the deep dives at the beginning? Are there other facets that you like to help with those companies as they grow and move forward?
Well, we always like to connect them to customers. And so our 40 plus investors so far are almost all business owners throughout Oklahoma and the region, which is part of our secret sauce because we have the built-in customers and built-in, referrals, right? And so, in fact, I'd say out of the 45 investors, there's probably 25 sectors, represented, certainly 15 or more. And and a lot of times we'll actually connect them with the customer before we invest. And it's kind of a way to, for one, to see how they do pitching a customer and how that customer reacts to it, but then also to prove to ourselves that we can be helpful. So if we can prove to ourselves that we can help that company, then that's that unfair advantage, talked about. So that's certainly a way. Channel partners, same way. And then just, my partner, David Woods, he has a career in strategic and executive coaching. And so he'll actually work, as we get further along with these companies, we'll work with them to develop that skill set and that growth.
Very cool. Is there a company or two that you want to share or highlight that you think you really see these people doing a good job?
Yeah, I think, so recently I think we shared on our website and our social media a company called Mido Materials. So the Haley Keith, the CEO, she was featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 last week. They also, were recognized as a top startup and have they have a graphene application, additive manufacturing. It's been piloting very well, and their growth has been their customer pipeline is pretty outstanding, and their technology is just something that it's been kind of the holy grail, try to figure out how to use graphene in a practical application in manufacturing, and they figured it out. And so loved seeing what they're doing. And then a company called SocialWise that we invested in. We recently were featured because Mark Cuban was also an investor, lead investor in that. And they are finishing a pilot in Dallas. It's a job tech and fintech platform. So, connects governments and nonprofits and private sector with, underserved employees and, for gig work and, blue collar work and others. And so they've gotten some well-deserved attention with their very novel application. So, tremendous opportunity for them and as well as social impact. So love seeing what they're doing too.
Awesome. Those do sound like pretty cool companies. How do you spell the first one, just so that I have this URL down?
Yeah, so Mido Materials, MITO. And then SocialWise actually has a unique spelling too. So social spelled the usual way, but Wise is WYZE.
All right. Done. We'll take a look at those. Okay, so thank you for that. Very informative. So the next question I have is that throughout the time that you've been working with startups, you've been investing in them, you were a startup. Is there a story, like we look for this heartfelt story of something that you couldn't believe it? You mentioned with Mido that they came up with this great way to work and build out their product. Female founder. Is there a story like just beyond all odds, they just were able to crush it, or they ended up having to fail because they couldn't get around the corner? Any story that just comes to mind that you're thinking like, man, this would be a good one to share that people can learn from?
Yeah, maybe. So, Cortado Ventures is so young that we don't have those stories, yet, but I can, tell one from one of my angel investments. Actually the first one I did with my good friend. And so this is a company that the technology, it's a chemical that can be used in agriculture or in energy, specifically in mining, or also in medical application. So as a disinfectant, or even as a kind of antibiotic. So it's one of these products that's been every test they do, with the FDA and USDA. It's just off the chart. It tests very well. It works. The point is, like, the product absolutely works, but trying to get to a point to commercialization, like that journey. I mean, that to me, like, looking back at that, I made that investment because it's like, I know this guy has a big road ahead of him, and who knows, it's really early, who knows what's going to play out, but I believe in him because he's going to just not give up and he's going to find a way to make it work. Well, that's absolutely played out now. And, the key pieces that fell in actually was, bringing in, a commercial minded person into the board level. And that was actually a bit of a turning point. And so that perhaps there's some lesson in there. And whether the lesson is, that tenacity and creativity and ability to keep going, especially when you know like the thing works, but trying to find that traction, like don't give up, but also having those right skill sets and having somebody who has successfully commercialized things, especially if they've done that in a couple of different unrelated areas. That person is absolutely just invaluable to have. I mean, as an investor, as for board leadership at a senior position. And so, but seeing how far they've come, and then just the last year, done more in the last year than I think the previous 6 or 7 years combined. So I think that's it's a tough road, but if you can take some of those lessons as an investor, but also as the entrepreneur, then I think that pays dividends.
So it's the resilience and being able to stick behind the product to build, and then look at areas of weakness and find where those strengths can be improved on, right? Finding that product person or the commercialization person made a big difference. So yeah, a ton of learning in that. And you know what? It doesn't happen overnight. So if it took you 6 years to get there, Netflix wasn't a masterful Netflix in 1 week. They took over a decade, almost 2 decades to become the size of Netflix. So, you may not start off doing the same thing on day one that you're doing 10 years from now, but as long as you've got a way to pivot and understand your environment, you have the opportunity to grow, right?
Absolutely.
I love it. All right, now we're going to just turn a little bit to the personal side. So, your favorite sports team?
Well, if I can go beyond pro, then I'd just say the University of Oklahoma Sooners. But pro, I'd say Oklahoma City Thunder, NBA. So very proud of our NBA team.
Yeah, they're a good team. OKC is pretty good. I think I'm a partial fan just because they've always had a very good, strong team. They weren't the Raptors last year, but they were. They really bring so much value to the game compared to Lakers and all these other teams. I just always enjoyed the style that OKC, and they went all the way. They played a really strong game. So big fan. I actually think they should have went all the way to the finals, but
yeah, well, we got. I mean, the players that have come out of our franchise are pretty incredible, and it might be a bit of a rebuilding, but got to have part of that long game, right? I mean, you can maybe take some lessons from entrepreneurship and apply it to being a fan.
Yep, completely agree. Okay, so does that mean you're a Raptors fan too, or no?
Mm-hmm.
No, are you sure? All right, so favorite movie and what character would you play in that movie?
Actually, like Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey.
Yep.
And I don't think I would ever say this about any other Matthew McConaughey movie, but I would play him. I mean, because he's the main guy and he gets to do cool stuff and travel through space and time. And but yeah, there's probably no other Matthew McConaughey movie where I'd be like, I want to be that guy. He's a cool guy, don't get me wrong, but it's not the character. But yeah, Interstellar, I love.
Yeah, that actually was a really good movie. There's like a whole list now of movies I got to go back and watch because of all the recommendations. But I did like Interstellar, and I remember it at the very end was when there were the rooms that were all caving in and dividing, and he had to make choices. That was the best part of the movie because it was the big puzzle, and I swear I was probably yelling at the screen, "No, go this way!" and whatever. But yeah. It was pretty intense. So great movie.
Love the soundtrack. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Nathaniel, I think that we've topped it off. I think you brought us through a great journey through all the things that you've kind of done and where you got to today. We got a little bit personal on finding out your favorite movie. And I kind of guessed that was your favorite sports team, but still glad to know that was it. But I think at the end of it all, I think we learned lots. As always, I take lots of notes. So I'm a fan, learned lots here. And very exciting what you guys are doing in Oklahoma. I think that I love the fact that you've got a whole group of Oklahoma entrepreneurs investing in the fund, and you guys are building out and investing in localized talent and bringing in some great companies that can kind of spread across the United States and globally. So kudos to you guys for all the great things you've been doing. And we hope to get you out to some of our events. So you guys can check out some of the global companies that we're showcasing. Maybe even get you on a panel. But outside that, again, thank you very much for all of this. And the last thing that we like to do is we like to leave you the last word. So anything you want to say to investors or to entrepreneurs, the show's yours. So take it away.
Yeah, I think now is an exciting time to to be investing in startups, right? I mean, we're seeing technological disruption and adoption, and the rate of startups reach record levels. So this is a great time, an exciting time to be an investor and see all the things that are happening. So and really appreciate the entrepreneurs that stick their neck out there. And I know they hear a lot of no's, but just know that every no means you're one step closer to a yes. So really appreciate everybody that's part of that magic.
Love it. You're right. There was one guy that we worked with and invested in. He said that he had 400 no's before he got a yes.
Oh man.
And they sold their company for I think it was $1 billion years later. So
400 people that are kicking themselves so
yep. Yeah. It takes time, but if you got the right mindset and the drive, you're going to make it there. So, but thank you very much again for your time. It was brilliant. We'll let you know when everything's done and ready. We'll ship it out, and we'll help promote it and push it across the lines, and we'll keep you posted in the probably the upcoming month.
Great. Well, thanks, JP. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, that was brilliant. So Nathaniel from Oklahoma City, man, I love the fact that he's got this great background in the Air Force, and how he brought that into the companies that he's built and what he's sold, engineering side, the 5 brothers, very cool background, and learn from that as well. And then just all the great things that they're doing in Oklahoma, OKC, by working and focusing on the localized talent and helping them grow, and then utilizing all of the investors and entrepreneurs to keep growing that fund and growing it and making that investment. So fantastic. And love the fact that Interstellar is one of his favorite movies. Great flick. So anyways, thanks a lot.